BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Hello and welcome to the Farming Today podcast with me, Charlotte Smith. In this episode, will England's farming budget survive the spending review? But let's start with an offer. £5 million is up for grabs. It's the latest round of the Farming Innovation Investor Partnerships competition. It offers government money alongside private investment to agri-tech companies. Well, as we've been reporting on this programme for decades now, technical innovation in farming has changed the way we farm, from fewer people and bigger machines to the use of drones and advances in breeding and feeding animals. But we've also reported on the failure of some innovative companies, from farm robots to vertical farming. Well, this week here on Farming Today, we're going to look at innovation, what works, what stifles it, and what's next. Dr. Kate Pressland is from the Centre for Effective Innovation in Agriculture.
There have been far more moves, perhaps in the last decade, to try and integrate farmers far better into research, with the principal idea that farmers will help make that research more relevant.
Now, we've got this £5 million on offer today, the latest round of the Farming Innovation Investor Partnerships. What's that, and how do you get hold of the money?
So this is a coming together of public and private investment, I guess de-risking it for each other a little bit. One of the huge challenges with innovating and R&D and for startups is funding. I mean, there's estimates that up to 90% of startups fail. So investors need to be diligent to ensure that their money is going on a good bed, and public money is there to start that innovation. So this is an interesting pairing.
Let's just talk briefly about some of the big ideas. I'm going to start with robots because, honestly, almost as long as I've been presenting this programme, they have been 5 years away. And I've been here for nearly 30 years. So why are they still not much of a reality on farms?
Some of it might be our expectations on how fast a sort of fourth agricultural revolution should be. I mean, if we think back, the second agricultural revolution took a couple of centuries. The third green revolution took 4 decades. If you think of robotic milking, for example, that came out, the early 90s. And even so, it's not overwhelmingly across our dairy industry. There's a bit more in Europe, but it's, maybe 10, maximum 20% across the UK. And all those farmers that I've ever met that has a robotic milker love it, think it's fantastic. Robotics are interesting because I think now we've got a parallel development happening with AI. So all of the robotics that have been developed are now going to be fitting into their software an AI element.
What about vertical farming, which has been talked about a lot, but has had problems actually breaking even?
Yeah, it's really difficult because with vertical farming, they've also been developing at a time of great energy uncertainty and hiked prices. And of course, by their very nature, they consume a lot of energy. Same with insect farming for protein. So I imagine that's extremely difficult to overcome. It's interesting. I think it will still be part of our future. I think we can't get around that with the demands on land.
Dr. Kate Pressland, and we'll have more on innovation all week. And though we often talk about innovative techniques for breeding livestock, like sheep and cattle on this programme, I'm pretty sure we've never discussed breeding falcons before. There are at least 19 falcon breeding facilities in the UK, supplying thousands of birds to the Middle East for the sport of falcon racing. Well, Polly Weston has made a programme all about the falcon industry, which you can hear later today here on BBC Radio 4. She's been to meet James Forty, who breeds falcons in Wiltshire.
Who's this up here?
So that one there cost me 14 grand, and he hasn't given me one drop of semen.
James's breeding facility has a room set up like a lab.
Yeah, so it's one that's hatched literally 10 o'clock this morning.
Oh my gosh. A row of incubators with chicks in.
Yeah, you wouldn't believe, 7 weeks, and that is a killing machine.
To produce the birds that are so in demand in the Middle East, you're crossing 2 different breeds, gerfalcon and the peregrine, and they won't mate naturally. Every bird egg has to be fertilised by hand, every drop of semen extracted and collected by a human.
So you've got imprinted birds, they think that you're the mate, so they will jump on you and hump you basically.
Imprinting means you raise the birds you want to breed from to view you as their mate. The way some breeders do this, using a perch on the floor, means some birds end up with a thing about feet. But for James, he doesn't do that.
So I've never had a a foot fetish bird,
They tend to want to hump his head.
you use a special sort of hat. They go on it and you extract the semen off of it. Some of them are a bit shy, so it's funny, you got to try and work out each one's like kink, if you like. So each of them have got like some of them have got different hats, different colour hats. You've got to try all these different things, you know. So some of them like it on your head, and they just blatantly that's it, mate with you, if you like. Some of them are a bit shy. You've got to put the hat on the floor or the hat on the nesting ledge, and they will then copulate with it, you know. But you've got to try and sort of figure them out.
James Forty there. You can hear more about the extraordinary world of falcon breeding in The Patch. That's at 11 o'clock this morning here on Radio 4, or it's available later on BBC Sounds. Next week, the Chancellor will announce the results of her spending review, and farming and wildlife groups in England are stepping up their campaigns to protect spending on nature-friendly farming schemes. The government has committed to a budget of £5 billion from 2024 to 26, but the fear, and in some cases expectation, is that that will be cut for successive years. Wildlife groups have long argued that the budget actually needs to increase to help meet legally binding climate and nature targets, while farming groups argue that if money for the schemes is cut, farmers will have no choice but to intensify to try to balance the books. We're talking here about ELMS, the environmental land management schemes, which have replaced the old EU-style subsidy payments in England. ELMS pay farmers public money for public goods, so they only get government money if they, for instance, plant and maintain hedges or grow crops that improve their soil. ELMS has 3 tiers: landscape recovery, countryside stewardship and the Sustainable Farming Incentive, the SFI. This is the scheme which was suddenly closed to new applicants earlier this year, something which many farmers say has undermined their confidence in the whole system. Well, the government says it plans to relaunch a modified SFI this summer, with applications opening next year, and has talked about targeting it at where it can make the most difference, which many take to mean at smaller farms in upland areas. Bigger farms may then not be eligible for the scheme. Well, I spoke to 2 farmers, one with 5,000 acres, the other with 180, to see what they make of this possible approach. First, Jane Bassett, who has sheep and beef cattle on 180 acres in the Peak District. She's also Regional Board Chair for the National Farmers Union in the Midlands.
If this speculation does turn out to be true, I personally think it's a huge blow for farmers, nature-friendly farming and the environment.
Although the government might argue, well, look, there are limited resources here, so we need to target them at where they are going to make the most difference.
Yes, of course, any government has got to be prudent and careful where they spend the money. We are a small farmer, but at the same time, I stand shoulder to shoulder with all farmers on this, of all types and sizes, because let's remember, the government wants to deliver at scale. 70% of the UK land is farmed, and we need all that land mass to work with nature, all of it in some shape or form.
Is that something that farmers might be able to do either without government money or with less government money, getting money from other places, or just changing the way they farm anyway?
Well, obviously farmers do adapt, but at the same time, what I feel about it is that with farming, we've had a contract, if you like, a conversation and a contract with government that it was partly funded by public money and partly funded by private money. And if they are going to change and then move away from this principle of public money for public environmental goods, it's very misjudged, this is, if it's going to go down more of a social focused policy.
And how important are these sorts of schemes for the bottom line for farmers?
Massively important. And if all of a sudden, in a couple of years' time, they don't contribute to this, from an industry point of view, it's seen as a betrayal.
Jane Bassett in Derbyshire. Well, Josh Stratton farms about 5,000 acres on Salisbury Plain in Wiltshire.
I think there's some sense in the government retargeting, but retargeting to small farms perhaps isn't the best way to use money. There are a lot of farms who are very good at nature restoration and have farms that are really well suited for it. And if the government really wants to do a policy which is for nature restoration, carbon reduction and so on, that is a different agenda to helping smaller farms. which is perhaps a social policy rather than a nature policy.
Although there is a feeling that larger farms have benefited more from this because they have people who can fill out all the forms and be on top of it all, whereas in a smaller farm, they just don't have that resource.
That is true to an extent, but what the farms such as us can do is we can help lead, and we can help with knowledge transfer. So, for example, we help to run the Wiley Valley Farmers Environmental Cluster, where we've got 40 farms, and we do lots of knowledge transfer. So all 40 farms in that group are helped by what we're doing and the targeted approach of the things we're helping with.
We have seen the SFI be closed to new applications earlier this year. Given that and all the rumours that are swirling around what will happen in the spending review, do you have confidence in these schemes for the future?
I think I do. I think all of ELMS is actually pretty well thought out. We're involved in all levels. So we've got a landscape recovery project on the River Wiley. We've got a higher tier stewardship scheme, and we're doing quite a lot of targeted SFI options on arable land. I think the SFI needs to be targeted better. I think some of the larger field-based options, the sort of non-food options, aren't particularly, I think they're a waste of money. But some of the options are really good, and they're helping us in lots and lots of ways.
Public finances are tight, and so if they decide that they have to make cuts to this budget, what do you think the impact will be?
I think we've all got to take a bit of pain. I think we all recognise that. But actually targeted on land size isn't necessarily the way to do that. I think the way to do it is to work out which of the options work really well for nature recovery and for lower carbon, healthy soil, cleaner water, and actually make those work better and target the money more cleverly.
Josh Stratton, a government spokesperson, told us we don't comment on budget speculation ahead of a fiscal event. That's it from us. I'm Charlotte Smith. The producer is Heather Simons, and Farming Today is a BBC Audio Bristol production.